It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II, and I'm here to take you through the top stories and conversations from this week's shows. Today, we will be revisiting discussions about AI in journalism and the legacy of jazz in Detroit. Plus, we'll talk with the professor about what it takes to envision a future for Black people in Detroit. But first, we'll start with a conversation about the city of Detroit's initiative to curb community violence. ShotStoppers is Detroit's most prized crime reduction program. For a little over a year, the Community Intervention Violence Project has helped stop violence before it happens. The numbers speak loudly. By the end of 2024, Detroit had 203 homicides, its lowest number recorded since 1965. And last October, the city also had a 45% drop in homicides in areas where ShotStoppers was implemented. That's compared to an 18% drop in places without it. But ShotStoppers may not continue past 2025. The program rests on federal American Rescue Plan Act dollars, which will soon fade. And state Democrats missed an opportunity to fund the program in Detroit and in other Michigan cities well into the future during their lame duck session. Many Detroiters are concerned about the program ending, and they're not alone. The Detroit Police Department is too. And that agency has been working to get ShotStoppers sustained funding. Producer Sam Corey sat down with the newly appointed Detroit Police Chief, Todd Bettison, to learn more about the program.
Why is ShotStoppers so effective?
Because of credible messengers, it's individuals that have influence with the population that typically drives violence. And when you think about it, people are only influenced by people that they respect and also by individuals that understand or been through what they've been through. And so with our ShotStoppers group, actually the name even came from the community itself. And so we have groups like Detroit 300, New Era Detroit, Detroit Friends and Families, and others who have been out there for years to be a mediator between conflict and beef. And so when the American Rescue Plan Act dollars became available, it was an opportunity for the city, for government, Mayor Duggan supported it, to actually be able to fund individuals and organizations that have been helping the Detroit Police Department over the years that really had no funding.
One of the things you're talking about is that the leaders of the program say they trust the police and that they've built trust with police officers. How helpful is it to have that trust between community leaders and police officers? What does that do practically for officers in the field?
It saves lives, because when you have trust in the community, you can actually keep a situation from happening. And we know that when a situation is active and when that first shot is fired and it hits someone, it's going to be a response from law enforcement. It's going to be a response from family members wanting to retaliate. And when bullets fly, we never know where they're going to land. And so by preventing these situations from ever happening, we actually prevent the negative cascading consequences, and you reduce that incident, but you reduce further down line other retaliatory type crimes. And so the community trust is key, because we really do trust each other. We built that relationship, and they can go places that police can't go, and we're able to really inspire young people and get them out the life of crime and violence.
Does it take some of the pressure off of officers to try to prevent things from happening on the front end and instead do more investigative work? Does it alleviate some of the pressure of all the things that police officers are tasked with doing?
Yes, it does. When you have fewer homicides, then with our homicide detectives and with our detectives that work in the precincts, they have more time to thoroughly investigate the cases that are before them. And so it gives them a chance to really catch their breath, take their time, and just really do that deep dive. But if you're just being bombarded case after case after case, it wears them out.
So tell me, what would it mean if the program doesn't get funding that it really needs? What would that mean for residents, and what would that mean for police officers?
Well, if it doesn't get funded, funding will run out because it's funded right now with American Rescue Plan Ag dollars, and that has an expiration date. So at the end of 2025, I will no longer be able to fund the tremendous work that these groups are doing. And so now one of the things that we, the mayor and others, are looking to do is get House Bill 4606, 4605 passed, and that's the Public Safety Trust. I'm working with State House Speaker Matt Hall right now and some of the other Democrats and Republicans, because for me, I'm issue-based. I just need to get this because, bipartisan, just being able to make sure that we enhance public safety across not just the city of Detroit, but the entire state of Michigan.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm producer Sam Corey, speaking with Todd Bettison, the interim Detroit Chief of Police. We're discussing the Shot Stoppers program, a community-led program which has helped reduce violence and which may lose funding sometime this year. Chief Bettison, you advocated for more funding, as you were talking about, from lawmakers in Lansing for Shot Stoppers. What happened from your perspective? Why didn't these bills pass during lame duck before Democrats lost the majority in the state house?
Well, I really don't want to speculate too much. We all know what happened. The House side, it just basically, I'll just say it imploded. Everything got shut down. So this bill didn't pass, and none of their other bills passed either. So it was an interesting, the most unique lame duck we've ever seen when it comes to the House of Representatives, and I'll just leave it at that.
Should focus on the places that have high crime and try something different. That feels like a different approach to fighting crime than what we had in the 90s and 2000s, where police are more focused on building relations with the community. They're more focused on targeting high crime areas, but not necessarily arresting people, but trying to understand the roots of violence and violent activity. What do you make of Deputy Franklin Hayes' statement?
He's accurate. Deputy Chief Hayes is spot on. Former Chief of Police James White used to frequently say the same thing, and I believe it at my core. I know it's true. You think about states that have high incarceration rates, individuals who get long prison sentences, they still, even though they're locking people up and throwing away the key, you still got a line of individuals that are still committing violent crime. You don't see lower crime rates. You just see more and more people getting incarcerated. So we have a cultural issue where we have to really inspire hope amongst the population that is actually committing those type of violent crimes. When individuals don't have hope or opportunity and really see another way out, then it's a cycle of violence that just continued.
Chief Bettison, how much, you said culture, and I hear you there, and I guess you sort of alluded to this, but I want to draw it out. How much of it is simply material? I mean, these community violence intervention programs are giving people money to try to stop violence before it happens. These areas are certainly higher in terms of poverty. How much of this is just a lack of material, lack of opportunity to move up the economic ladder?
Yeah, that's a part of it, but it's still culture as well. You have to inspire individuals and show them that they can fit into a legitimate and make it as far as doing things that are not street-based. I know this for a fact. I mean, I've actually, as chief of police, and when I was deputy mayor a couple years ago, I actually took a prison tour in Louisiana. I went to 3 prisons. I talked to individuals on the inside who were locked up. And the state of Louisiana has some of the highest incarceration rates, and they also have very, very harsh penalties. But you think about New Orleans, you think about Baton Rouge, you think about those other places, they're still very violent cities. And so locking people up, just throwing away the key, doesn't work. And because it hasn't lowered the crime. So you have to do something else. And I actually asked the population that was locked up for very violent crimes, what could I do? What would you do if you was deputy mayor? What would you do if you were police chief to save your little brother, your little sister? What would you do to stop the violence? And they said, yep, definitely get with the kids while they're younger. Before they actually come off the playground and start going into high school, you have to inspire and get with them, give them programming, giving them something to do, because oftentimes once they get to high school, it can be too late because they've already joined the gang. And it's not just about money, it's about a sense of belonging. So what I'm saying, these CBI groups, these influencers, they're able to inspire the young people and give them that sense of belonging and put them on the right path, rather than having somebody who's on the wrong path, who's in a gang, engaged in violence, selling drugs, inspire them to go that path. We really have to make it okay and really cool and popular to do the right thing, because at the end of the day, children and people want to be socially accepted.
This does lead me to my next question, which is, I know you have to deal with violence in the now and stopping violence and harm right now, which is a very tall task. I do wonder, in terms of long-term programs, because you do think a lot about stopping violence before it happens down the road, what kind of programs do you want the city of Detroit, the state of Michigan, even the federal government to be investing in to stop violence decades into the future?
So I'm an "and" person. That is my favorite word. Everyone around here knows that I'm A-N-D, not or, not this or that, but and. And so because violence doesn't have one thing that drives it, is definitely complicated. So we have to add layers there. And so I'm dealing with stopping crime before it happens, deterring crime, preventing crime. But I know that we do have violent predators out there that need to be addressed right now. And so we utilize technology. One of the things that we have in the city of Detroit is our Green Light program, where we have the public-private partnership with businesses that pumps into our real-time crime center, where we have cameras where we can see, it's recorded, and we're able to identify the exact who did what so that we can apprehend them.
I am asking you a little bit to imagine, if you're in charge of the state legislature, to invest in certain programs, be it education, healthcare, jobs, what have you. I'm curious which things you would think would help reduce crime the most, again, decades into the future.
Really, education. Education. We have an educational crisis in this country. And so when I have individuals that can't read, then they can't compete. And then when I talk about the sense of hopelessness, when you can't read, you don't see yourself or imagine yourself in the future, and your options are so limited, and you're embarrassed. So oftentimes they don't have much of an option but in order to support their families and in order to hold these professional positions, or they can't even get into a factory if you can't read. And we got a large percentage of our population that can't read. If you look at where Michigan ranks when it comes to our children being able to read, we got a serious problem. And so I would say that we have to, as a community, as a country, and as a state, deal with our educational crisis that's occurring here. Otherwise, we have a population of young people that we've let down.
Before I let you go, Mayor Mike Duggan has recommended that you become the permanent police chief. It will still take approval from City Council, but it looks like this will be the likely outcome. This is a very hard job to hold, as you know, Chief Bettison. There's a lot of pressure to both defend your officers in the field and also appropriately hold them accountable when they stray or when they do wrong. How do you thread that needle? What is that sort of sense of stable leadership look like to you?
I've been doing it a long time, grew up in the organization, and I hold myself accountable, and I will hold officers accountable. Officers that wear the badge, we take an oath, and our oath is to protect and serve and to not tarnish that badge. And good officers that take that oath seriously, when it comes to corruption and officers violating the oath, I have no tolerance for that. So I just wanted to be crystal clear when it comes to that. But I do support my officers 100%. And so as long as they're not nefarious, and if they make an honest mistake, I'm going to stand behind them. You know, if they're out there trying to do good, nobody's perfect. We don't always get it right, but it's about your intent and it's about your heart.
That was Metro producer Sam Corey speaking with Detroit Police Chief Todd Bettison about the future of a community violence intervention program that's had a big impact on safety in Detroit. On Tuesday, the city council voted to approve the appointment of Chief Bettison as the next police chief. He was the interim police chief at the time of this conversation. Coming up, we'll talk about what you are missing out on at your local library. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II. When was the last time you spent time at your local library? Has the internet completely replaced it as a resource for information for you? If you're like me and sometimes forget how helpful a library can be or how useful its staff and endless tools are, this next conversation is for you. Hosts Tia and Robin talk to Jeff Milo, who's a host on WDET and a library worker himself.
The public library is more than just a place that houses books and other reading materials, as I'm learning. It's a community hub, an art gallery, sometimes summer barbecue spot, and even a place to rent tools. But why don't more people use their public libraries? And why don't they know about all of the cool offerings that happen all year long?
Tia, do you know about all of the cool offerings happening all year long?
I do. I do.
Because of the research you did for
I was going to say, because of the work that I do on a daily basis, I do know what's happening in the library system here.
All right, so you're up on that. Now tell me this. What's the last book you read from the library?
You know, honestly, probably a Shel Silverstein book in middle school.
The Giving Tree, Where the Sidewalk Ends. What are we talking about here? Shel Silverstein is the man. I think, though, I'm going to have to shame you right now and say you should be ashamed of your shelf. And that's a Jeff Milo line right there. Shout out to Jeff Milo, who we'll bring on the mic in a moment here. All right, so my next question, while we have you in the interrogation seat, when was the last time you had a library card?
You know, put me on the spot. Put me on the spot. Honestly, probably high school. The last time I owned a library card.
So that means the last time you were in a public library, was it in high school?
No, I've recently been in a public library doing other things and other offerings. You know, they have lots of conversations, panel discussions, different things like that. So I will go to the public library for those extracurricular activities and events. But to actually like get a book or to do some of the other cool things that they have to offer that you can take with you, falling short.
Hey, there is no shame here because Jeff Milo is here to get us excited about going to the library, about why we should spend more time at libraries. He's the host of My Weekly on WDET. He's also an employee at Ferndale Public Library and, unsurprisingly, an avid reader. Jeff, welcome to the Metro.
Yeah, and I should say that my microphone was not muted, so that when Tia said she hadn't had a library card, I was restraining myself.
I saw that. I saw you squirming, and I saw one tear roll down your cheek.
Yeah, no, but it's fine because a library is there for you whether you have your library card or not. It is a space you can enter at all times. It is one of the, if not the last remaining space in the society we live in that does not require you to buy anything upon entry. You can stay there for as long as you want, and it's beautiful.
I wonder if we could talk about one of the really crucial roles that libraries play in safeguarding free speech and being a pillar of democracy, much in the same way that the Fourth Estate, otherwise known as journalism, is too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So you'll see often every September, libraries will get pretty energized about something that is known as Banned Books Week, because there are often ongoing efforts to ban or challenge materials that are available on the shelves of public libraries, and that's censorship, and we don't like that. And that infringes upon something known as your intellectual freedoms, which is covered under the First Amendment, and that means you have the right to access any information you want, even if it's a book. And the thing is that libraries will like to harp on, not that they're going to choose sides here or anything, is that, well, there's a saying out there that a good library has something on the shelves that offends anyone, or at least everything on the shelf might not be for you, but everything on the shelves of the library is for someone.
Yeah.
This is the case that we have to make about free speech and censorship, in that if you are fighting to censor ideas that offend you or that you don't agree with, what happens then when someone else is in power, someone else is making the decisions, and then they decide it's time to censor those ideas that you agree with, right?
Oh gosh,
which is
yes, exactly.
why we have to fight for free speech for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you've noticed an increase in visitors and library card holders recently.
Oh, I'd say it's been pretty steady at Ferndale for sure. I don't think it's been a surge or a tidal wave, but it definitely picked up after quarantine. And it's been really steady. We've been really liking the numbers. So that's lovely to see. And I think that's because people are realizing how valuable it is to have a library card. So you're saying, Tia, that you haven't been in a library, but you don't have to go into your library anymore to use your library card. You could be doing that all from home if you want to, because your library card will get you access to downloading free ebooks, audiobooks, and then also, for a lot of libraries, streaming movies as well.
We're going to get into all of these special services that Tia is about to start using. But before we do, the Ferndale Library is a community center of sorts. So how is it that the library is able to offer all of these different activities for residents, and what are some of those?
Well, amazing staff. That's like simply the answer right there. Amazing, energized, creative staff who are constantly thinking up fun, amazing events and ongoing programs.
One in particular, correct? Sits before us.
I'm a music host here at WDET, so the Ferndale Library hosts monthly concerts. Like, there's your connection there. The local music scene is constantly coming into the library where I happen to work. It's just a coincidence. But that is the thing about library staff. I think they're all bringing their talents to the table, so it's not necessarily that you need a Jeff Milo at your library. You could have someone who is really into fiber arts, who's going to start a fiber arts club. We do now. Or a board game club, or a chess club, or a book club, or a film club, or a sci-fi book club, or a graphic novel book club, etc., etc., etc. Story times for babies, for families. I could go on and on.
So you're saying, though, what's really important to Ferndale Library, and I'm guessing other libraries as well, is having a diverse staff who bring a lot of different life experiences and interests to the table. And again, I'm seeing this parallel again with a good newsroom. The same thing happens in a good newsroom. You have diverse staff members who are bringing a lot of different ideas and life experiences, and that's informing the things that they cover.
Yeah, and you also have to know your community, just like a newsroom has to know your community. We're responding to our community. We're responding to what our community loves. And for just one example, we know that Ferndalians, they love a hands-on thing. If it's a craft, registration fills in like 2 hours. It's like Taylor Swift tickets. So like, we're going to keep making programs that have crafts for sure.
What about getting more young people involved? Can you talk about where that sits on the priority list for Ferndale Library?
Well, again, it's a sense of creating community. So we have two very popular programs for middle grade students. We have a board game club for grades 6 through 8, and we have a tabletop RPG club for grades 6 or 8. And yeah, that's kind of beautiful. But the thing is, you're bringing students of that age into the library, which is a wonderful, welcoming space. They get to have some fun, play some RPG, but they're also socializing. They're just hanging out and meeting fellow students. And maybe they aren't even in the same classes during the daytime, but now they're hanging out at the library. It's pretty wonderful. And those things fill up every month that we do them. So
getting some interpersonal skills, getting off of screens.
Yeah, or even our Reading Rainbow Book Club, which is for grades 4 through 8. We partner with Affirmations, which is the community center just down the street. And so that's just a brag for Ferndale. So yeah, but all libraries are doing these kinds of things. Like, we're just one example.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. And we're chatting with Jeff Milo, the host of My Loco, which is a weekly program here every Tuesday on WDET. Jeff is also an employee at the Ferndale Public Library, and he is also an avid reader. And now, in 2016, you talked a little bit about partnering up with WDET. Of course, you traveled to 5 different libraries throughout southeastern Michigan to talk about literacy, to talk about fact-based information and finding. Can you talk a little bit about why you felt that was needed during that time?
2016 feels like such a long time ago, doesn't it?
It's almost a decade.
Well, so this started in January of 2018 after we had endured about a year's worth of, let's just say, loud voices on social media saying things like fake news and alternate facts. What was it? Alternate facts or whatever?
Yeah.
Or what have you?
An alternate fact. I mean, that phrase in and of itself just makes my mind explode.
And we realized that, well, libraries have an important role in strengthening what we call media literacy. We have computer labs. We have talented library staff. If you have questions about how you work your smartphone, we'll probably be able to help you out, because we do want you to be able to explore the internet, because we want to help you access information. Journalists, on the other hand, very big on information literacy, making sure you can assess what is and isn't real. Something else. Well, I don't want to get into that anecdote, but we'll get to it later. So we decided to have panel discussions. I will get into that anecdote in 10 seconds. We decided to have these panel discussions, or I knocked on the door at WDT and said, would you guys come to the Ferndale Library? And we had 3 librarians, 3 journalists, table, microphones. We had 85 people show up, standing room only, Q&A, and we were running through the things of how do you assess information, and even just giving you some of the easy tips, like, did you hear something that sounded preposterously amazing on the internet? Did you Google that and see if, like, the Associated Press and New York Times are reporting on it too, or was it just like something with a weird URL?
Yeah.
Things like that. So we were going through all that. And then just also journalists and librarians talking about what they do. It was really beautiful. We called it Give Me Some Truth.
Yes.
For any John Lennon fans out there.
Give me some truth. Now, almost 10 years later, what has changed? How different would that conversation look now? Do you see that conversation or conversations like that happening in terms of teaching literacy and talking about literacy and talking about the way we consume what we're seeing right now?
I think we're going to find out.
Okay.
Here we are, what is it, a month and a half into a new administration. I think we're going to find out. It's been a busy, crazy couple of months. I will say that, and I don't know if I'm like giving myself more work here or having on-air like brainstorming, but we were going to do a round 2 of these. It's just that we had it scheduled for April of 2020, and something happened then. We didn't. We weren't open.
I don't know what happened.
So maybe we'll bring it back around again. Maybe that's the answer to the question.
And I think not trying to plug the metro, not trying to plug the metro.
Never. We don't do that.
The conversation's ongoing here, isn't it?
Yes,
Right
exactly. Would love to take the metro on the road with you to different libraries, and we can figure out what people are feeling, where their minds are, where their hearts are, especially as we just go through so many changes. Within, like you said, it's only been like a month and a half, and we've been through not even a month and a half, a month, and we've been through. It feels like years. So, just hitting on the road again and talking to the folks would be great. So let us know what the Metro can do. And you can, of course,
keep in touch with the American Library Association and the Michigan Library Association. So follow them on social media.
It helps. I do actually.
All right.
I do actually, but I don't use my free library access. But so we're going to get back to the library here. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that you all do offer at the Ferndale Library, just like most libraries, but you all offer so many cool and unique things. You talked about it the last time we spoke. You have tool checkouts. You can check out tools and all types of cool things. So can you talk about the resources that you offer outside of a computer lab and books?
Yeah, that's right. So just on social media this morning, I posted about how our librarians actually installed the whiteboard in our new study room using the tools available in our library of things. That's what we call it. That's what most libraries call it, library of things, because you think the library is probably just a building full of books. No, we've got things. Let me tell you about the things. We have tools, instruments. You can check out a sewing machine if you want, video games, board games. You can check out seed packets for when March gets here. You can get going in your garden. I mean, I could go on and on. You could stud finders for sure, a metal detector if you lose your ring at the beach. And these are things that you might, be panicking and running to a hardware store to buy. But how many times are you going to use a stud finder? Just that once, So just check it out for 2 weeks from your library with your library card, with the resource that you support as a resident of the city where you live. It's beautiful.
Robert, I was going to say, could you imagine going to the library to check out something that you would normally go buy? I need to go buy this whole new, drill set.
I want to go get a sewing machine now because I left mine behind when I moved back here from Colorado. It needed to be fixed. It was huge and cumbersome, and now I am lamenting that decision. So,
Oh, and then I could put a display sign up that says, "Thread anything good lately?"
Oh.
You know what? See yourself out of here, Jeff Milo. That's enough.
Okay, so earlier you did say I could access the library from my house. So what are you talking about, ebooks and movies?
Okay, yeah. So a lot of libraries have what they're usually doing is they're purchasing these digital licenses from publishers, and we have a distributor. It's called Overdrive, and so we're actually building our digital collection. So you can go to the Ferndale Library and click on online resources. It's probably the same for a lot of libraries. You can download an app. One's called Libby. One's called Hoopla. You can just start downloading ebooks and audiobooks just by entering your library card number. So that's in, competition to some things like Audible, which you might have to pay a little money for, which is fine. But and then there's also Canopy. It's what I refer to as the golden age of Netflix from the 2010s when it actually just had movies. Yeah. Canopy is something you can use your library card for and just stream up to 30,000 independent films and documentaries right now on your smart device or
free is where you got me. Free.
Mm-hmm.
Free was where you got me. And the last thing is, what are some of the most surprising things that you have found, learned, communicated through the Ferndale Library?
Just from working there?
Yeah.
I think it goes back to how you said you'd been to libraries. And what I've evolved to realize is that library is a space. It's not only just a place that you can get things from, which are wonderful, but it literally is just a space. And it's also a space where very creative, nice, friendly, informative, helpful people work. And I just think that's beautiful. So let us just say, it is for everyone. Anyone can walk in, and because of intellectual freedoms, you can get exactly what you want, whatever you're looking for. Librarian is there to help you.
I love it.
And everyone on staff, we're there to help you.
And I've never met a mean person at the library who worked at the library.
Oh,
Not once. Not once. So, go to the library, support your local libraries, make sure you're talking to the librarians and all the employees there as well, because they're there to help you. Jeff Milo is the marketing coordinator at the Ferndale Public Library and the host of My Local here on WDET. You can tune in to My Local every single Tuesday night at 9 p.m.
Yeah, that's right. And we don't really shush you at the library either. Just don't dog-ear the pages.
Up next, Tia and Robin talk with a local jazz icon about the genre's legacy in the city of Detroit. We'll be right back on the Metro. Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Kerry Jr. II. Next up, Tia and Robin spoke with a local jazz icon from the city of Detroit to discuss the history and legacy of the genre in the city.
What does jazz mean to Detroit? It can arguably be compared to what Motown means to Detroit. The jazz session musicians who supported Smokey Robinson, the Supremes, and the entire Motown sound were foundational to that music. That's to say, jazz and its history are long and rich in Detroit. Often, the city and its audacity to be black produced its own unique sound in the jazz world, and it produced legends along the way like Marcus Belgrave, known far and wide as a musical savant and mentor to artists who we all praise today. And that brings us to bassist Marion Hayden. Hayden, like so many jazz greats, was a student to Belgrave. Beginning at Cass Technical High School at 16 years old, Marion's love for music was solidified when the two connected.
That's right, Tia. But before the meeting between Belgrave and Hayden grew up in a sonically rich home where both her parents played piano. She grew up in the historic Russell Woods during a time when art and creative outlets within Black Detroit were thriving. A graduate of Henry Ford High School, Marion Hayden is this year's Kresge Eminent Artist, and she joins us now. Marion, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me this morning. So excited to be here.
So growing up, your parents were music lovers and they actively played music in your home. Could you talk about growing up in that kind of musical atmosphere and having it as an outlet from an early age?
Well, I think that one of the things that we really don't think a lot about is how impactful it is to let, as Charles Mingus, the great bassist Charles Mingus wrote a piece called "Let My Children Hear Music." You have to let your children hear music, all kinds of music. These things are making all kinds of neural connections for them. They are connecting them with place, with people, with emotions. And I was just very, very fortunate that my parents had a great love for music. My dad was a huge jazz lover and just had all kinds of jazz records. These were records during that time that he played and let me have access to. And my mother was more of a listener of classical music and the American Songbook. So those things were just kind of embedded in my brain. And so when I made the choice to play music, all of this music just started coming out from childhood, and it was meaningful, very meaningful for me that way. So I just think it's really important that we let children experience all kinds of music. It's something that we can really do for the world. It's really a world peace initiative, if you want to think about it that way.
Music and world peace, absolutely. Those two are quite intertwined. I do want to stay in the past for a moment and meditate on that if we could. I'm wondering what it was like growing up in Detroit when its public schools had the funding to focus more on music education, certainly in comparison to today, where that is we're in more of a difficult situation at a lot of Detroit's public schools.
It was a very rich environment for learning music. If you had a passion, or if you just thought you might like to try something, then you could try an instrument. I remember when I first, I didn't really have an inkling that I was going to play an instrument until I was like maybe 8 or 9 years old. And I was in my classroom, third or fourth grade, and they said, "Who would like to come and play an instrument?" That was how the discussion starts. And we started, and I said yes, and a few of us in the classroom said, "Yeah, we'd like to." And it just so happens that at my very small elementary school, all we had was strings. So we went down there and chose a string instrument. They had the violins, viola, and cello, and so I chose cello. It was almost everyone I knew played something at one time, even if they only played it for a little while. They played it in their elementary school orchestra or band, or they took choral music. Right, all of the schools had choral music, so even if you weren't playing an instrument, you could sing. And what this really did is it develops your audiences. Right, it's not just about bringing in new musicians, but it also is audience development, right? Because if you know something about music and you appreciate it, then you're much more likely to be passionate about seeing live music because you know what that's all about. So we not only did all the schools have some sort of orchestras or bands, but they also had something that I participated in called a regional orchestra, and that was something that was put together where several schools in a particular region of the Detroit Board of Ed, came together once a week and had a large orchestra of the best players, and that was super fun. So just as I said, it was really about audience development. So if we're looking at now and seeing where are our audiences, then that's also part of the issue. It's not just growing, the developing of young musicians, but it's also the developing of future audiences is what we're missing out on.
Sure. I mean, it was an environment that was nourishing the engagement of audiences, but also nourishing your curiosity and your creativity as a kid. I wonder what it was like to pick up the cello for the first time and what you were thinking when you were first playing that instrument.
I remember exactly. It was just a little fire that just got completely lit when I heard the cello. When I stood next to it and heard the low notes, which that was kind of that was my voice. I'm not a person with a high pitched voice, even although I just have never really had a huge super. So I just thought it was wonderful, and it was the fire that never went out. And when I talk to my students about things, sometimes I do master classes, and one of the things that I'd like to engage them on is this question of when was your fire lit? When did you know that you could not be separated from playing an instrument? When was your fire lit? And so that was when my fire was lit, when I heard the instrument, when I heard the low notes, I plucked the strings, I felt the vibrations, I saw the very beautiful shiny brown wood, and the contours of it, and held it very close to me. That was when my fire was lit. So at that point, I was determined to just keep doing it until I sounded good, which takes some time. One must be patient.
I imagine that when kids hear that question, when was your fire lit, that you're getting all manner of descriptive, exciting responses from them. And it has me wondering how you would say music education has evolved over the years. In your opinion, where is music education in Detroit right now, for example, and how have you worked to continue access to music education?
Well, I just say thank God for the great music educators that we do have in our DPS schools. I know many of them, and they are really terrific. They've been able to really do a yeoman's job of keeping our music education programs rolling, even though sometimes they have not been funded to the extent that they would prefer, that they would like. But I would say that we are still there. I said we also have a number of outside entities that are helping with this, and this has been a very important thing. I actually teach for the Detroit Jazz Festival. They have an educational arm, and there's several of us musicians that the Detroit Jazz Festival has supports to go into high schools and elementary middle schools to help shore up these teachers, to support them and also give them a bit of jazz within their music education. And that's, I really appreciate DPS for doing that. I believe the Sphinx program also has some in-school programs that they do to support DPS. And also I believe Music Hall has a program that they're doing. And so I think these outside entities also are really great adjuncts to what DPS, Detroit Public School District, already has. And I think what we really just need is we need to spread the word. I think that they need, the DPS needs, we need a couple of angels in there. We need more angels. We need someone who's willing to say, I'm going to fix all the instruments in the school. I'm going to, I'm going to make sure that there are working instruments for any school that wants them. We need a couple angels out there. I'm always casting about for folks like that. I think, it could be somebody, one of the Motown legends or somebody. We need a few angels out there to help shore them up. But we do have programs for young folks, and we have excellent teachers. We just need more programs.
Calling all the angels. You're listening to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We're speaking with bassist Marion Hayden. She's this year's Kresge Eminent Artist. Now, Marion, oftentimes when I think about Detroit, I think about the arts movement in the 60s and the 70s, all that creative energy that was buzzing around. And I think about the access to the legends that you have. These folks also precede you in winning this award as well. Marcus Belgrave, Wendell Harrison. Can you just talk about working with Marcus Belgrave just a little bit? He was such a huge, important figure in the city of Detroit in jazz and teaching so many people.
I'm always glad to talk about my mentors, Wendell Harrison and Marcus Belgrave. And I should also mention Patricia Terry Ross, yes, who is the fantastic harpist, also someone who was very impactful for me. But I met Marcus. Marcus was probably the first person that I met. Marcus and Wendell were running a program at called Metro Arts, and I always like to say this is how I know that jazz education, and particularly these summer jazz programs, are really impactful, because that was my first first way that I was exposed to jazz in a small group setting, working with veterans, great jazz musicians, working with someone like Marcus, and with other young people like myself. And this was a small group environment in which we learned in. And Marcus was one of those people. He was just kind of a natural teacher, I'd say. He was very passionate about about the music, about musicianship. Period. First, so it was certainly passionate about jazz and improvisational music, but he was just a really excellent musician first. So all the kinds of things we talk about: reading music, making sure that you play in tune, being very attentive to the intention of any particular composer and composition. Those are the kinds of things that we talked about with Marcus. And then you add on top of that your passion for the music, right? So your passion for whatever you're doing has to always shine through. And so I remember when I first started working with Marcus, he wouldn't necessarily give us sheet music for things. I remember very well. There was a song that he gave us, and so as opposed to writing out the bass line for me, which I probably couldn't have read at that time in my little 13, 14-year-old self, he just he sang the bass line to me, right? So and then the bass line went something like this. It's going to sound really crazy, but it went. He said, "Marion, I want you to play this." And he had a really low, gravelly voice, sounded like Louis Armstrong naturally. He said, "Marion, I want you to play like this. Ding dong, ding 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 dong, ding dong, ding 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 dong." So ding dong, ding, make it sound just like that. Now, so I took my little hands in the bass and made it sound just like that. And that was, in fact, what the bass line was. And years later, when I finally heard the record, I had the biggest laugh of my life, because that was entirely what the line was, and he sang it to me perfectly, and I knew that line by heart, because from getting it directly from him. So so a lot of working with Marcus was both very, very much working in the realm of the written, but also in the realm of a real African way of mentor to prodigy kind of learning, and that's a very impactful. It's very powerful. And so I did so many different things: big band, small group with Marcus, and I worked with him until he left the earth. I gained so much wisdom from him, and I'll never forget his sound. Once you get the sound of his horn in your ear, there's no mistaking it. He completely spoiled me for what the trumpet is supposed to sound like. He really kind of set a crazy high bar for me at that age for what?
Marion,
just liquid silver.
Hate to cut you off here, but talking about Marcus, because I know we can talk about Marcus Belgrave and
We
everything that he brought to jazz for a whole hour plus longer than that. But I do want to get into, as we get down to the end of the conversation here, the impact. I want to talk to you about being a woman in jazz, because we're a company when we talk about just the front-facing woman of jazz, and you're one of those women who've been able to break through in a way that a lot of women have worked to do. So there are more front-facing women in jazz now more than ever. India Owens is one of those young bassists right now. Terry Lynn Carrington, Regina Carter. We can keep going on. Can you talk about where we are with women in jazz today?
Well, I think that we're on a pretty good path. We're better. I think that that over the years, having jazz become more of a part of the academy has actually been helpful in that effort in some ways, because women have to young men and young women sit in a classroom together, so they have to see each other as colleagues. And when I was coming up, it was a little different. My training in jazz was not in the academy. It was more in the academy of the club and the concert hall and those things, and so it was a little different. So I think that we're better. We could be better, but we can be even better than that. I feel that women have. I noticed that women are more band leaders. Yeah. That's a great thing, but women have not been as much what we call accompanying musicians, or in the parlance of jazz, we call sidemen, or side musicians, and that's a very lucrative field, and it's a little easier than having to always be the leader. So I think that we still have many strides to make, but we're on a much better path. And I love India. She's from right here in my hometown, and I'm a huge supporter of hers, and she knows it too.
Yes, I love
and
India.
Terry Lynn as well.
Exactly, both
and
of those.
Regina, of course, and my great band Straight Ahead, who was really the first all women band to be signed to a major record label from right here in Detroit.
Yeah, I love that so much. Got a shout out to all the Detroit jazz musicians, especially the women out there. India Owens is a Spartan as well, Detroiter, and she's working for the Colbert Show right now. So, and touring the country. So, Marion Hayden, the bassist. She is awarded the 2016 Kresge Artist Fellowship, the U.S. Congressional Commendation, a Spirit of Detroit and Detroit Ace Award winner, and a Jazz Hero Award winner from the Jazz Journalists Association, and not to forget, the 2025 Kresge Eminent Artist. Marion, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Coming up at 11, we'll have more conversations from this past week you may have missed. Stay with us. It's the Metro. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II, and I'll be revisiting the conversations you may have missed from this past week. This next conversation hits close to home. It's about artificial intelligence in journalism and how this world-shifting technology impacts how we as journalists keep you as listeners and readers and viewers informed.
AI is making its way into nearly every profession, and that includes the vital public service work of journalism. Artificial intelligence is a powerful tool, and as much as it can aid us in our work, it carries with it a number of risks, like hallucinations or lies, data security concerns, job loss. The question is not if newsrooms will use AI, though. It really is how they will use it. Some newsrooms are embracing the technology. Some use it a little bit, and others not at all. Local news sources, regardless, are disappearing, all while AI is occupying every nook and cranny of our digital white-collar workday and asking us, can I make that easier for you?
Robin, how existential is that question? Is it adapt or die for local news in the face of AI? What ethical dilemmas are journalists facing with artificial intelligence now? To help us answer those questions, we're joined by Margaret Sullivan. She's the executive director for the Craig Newark Center for Journalism Ethics and Security at Columbia University. She's also a former media columnist for the Washington Post, a former public editor for the New York Times, and an author. She writes a Substack newsletter about journalism and democracy titled American Crisis. Margaret Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks so much for having me. This is a great subject to sink our teeth into.
I'm ready to sink our teeth into it. So we're going to talk about the benefits of artificial intelligence in news and the ethical risks it presents. Let's start with the opportunities.
So, as you said, and as your last guest has said, this is a very powerful tool. We're in the beginning stages of it. I mean, if you can zoom out a little bit, true, it's been around for a while, but in terms of newsrooms really using it, we're grappling with this. I've talked to a lot of the standards editors at big news organizations, and they say, wow, we're having trouble even keeping up with the change and coming up with rules and regulations around how we use it, because it's just changing so quickly. So there's no question that there's tremendous opportunity here. And as you noted, there's a lot of risk as well. I just want to note, too, because your topic has a lot to do with local news, and thank you for the introduction. I also spent a couple of decades at my local newspaper on a Great Lake, a different Great Lake than Lake Michigan, Lake Erie. I was a reporter and then an editor and then the top editor at the Buffalo News before I went to the Times as public editor. So local news and what's happened to it is very much, it's a really important topic for me.
And Margaret, just kind of staying there a little bit, talking about local newsrooms in general, and just keeping up with the times. It's one thing that we've all talked about within the journalism, or within the industry of journalism as a whole, is not keeping up with the times. Whether it's podcasting, whether it's social media, no matter what it is, there are some things that the journalism world is not catching up to. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is for us to be in the forefront of AI, especially when we talk about local newsroom using AI?
Right. Well, we have to put this in the context of how poorly local newsrooms, and I think particularly local newspapers, responded, somewhat now 15 or 20 years ago to the onset of the Internet in their business. Newspapers in particular were kind of fat and happy. They were raking in this advertising money, and then all of a sudden it seemed like the Internet had come along, and we did not do a great job of adjusting. And in fact, it's been part of the reason that local news has been so decimated, is that we, really didn't get with the program too quickly. And we were, tied to the past and somehow had this idea that all the riches of the past were going to come roaring back. So now, we have another opportunity. My own feeling, and I've really been spending some time researching this, is that AI can be helpful to us. I'm not sure that it actually, saves our business model. It's hard for me to figure out how that would happen, but I think it can, it can help us do a better job for the public. But as your last guest was so eloquent in saying, there has to be a human being or a number of human beings in the loop. We can't just take what AI comes up with and present it to the public. It has to be a tool, but not a substitute for journalism.
And Margaret, what problems do you see AI solving for local newsrooms, especially the smaller, understaffed newsrooms that we're seeing across the country?
I mean, I think that it can do some, for example, when newsrooms are trying to do data reporting and they're presented with, huge amounts of data that may have come from a government agency or, some other place, and there could be great stories there. AI is pretty good at sifting through data, taking our commands and telling us what the patterns are and what the possibilities are for stories. So, that is a way to do enterprise or investigative reporting, a part of it. It's a way to do a part of the investigative or enterprise reporting that's so important to the public. Where I think I've seen news organizations falling down, and that some of them have been very dramatic in the mistakes they've made. For example, Sports Illustrated actually presented AI-driven material or AI-gathered material in the form of avatars that looked like real people, real reporters, real journalists with names and photographs and, stories underneath that. Well, these people didn't exist, so they were lying to the public. And it was a great embarrassment for Sports Illustrated, which is, a much different brand than it used to be anyway. So there's a lot that has to happen with transparency and with, caution, I think, here.
Just sticking there just a little bit, because just what you're just talking about a little bit, I want to focus on the ethical debate surrounding news and artificial intelligence. You just hit on it a little bit there, because how ethical is it to use those generated journalists, I guess you can say, and have them act as if they're real, So since journalists are...
absolutely it's an ethical violation.
Yeah.
And, I think if you went out in the street and asked a bunch of people, would they like their newsrooms to be using AI as if it, and presenting it as if it was actually coming from journalists, they would say absolutely not. So, it's funny because transparency on this is so important, and it kind of cuts both ways because as we tell people, some of this material was done with the help of artificial intelligence, it kind of puts people's antenna up, and they may not like to hear that. So I think it's important to be transparent about how much we use it and to be clear that it's not the final product. And it simply cannot be the final product, certainly not at this point, because there's just too many errors. There's too much room for error. And it's actually also just not, that's not what journalism is. I think if we think of it as a tool, but not an answer or a panacea, that's probably heading us in a better direction.
You're listening to The Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about journalism and artificial intelligence. Our guest is Margaret Sullivan. She's the executive director for the Craig Newmark Center for Journalism Ethics and Security at Columbia University. She also has a Substack I've been reading a lot. It's a newsletter called American Crisis. We also want to hear from you. Will artificial intelligence save local news, or could it be its downfall? The number is 313-577-1019. Now, Margaret, generative AI models like ChatGPT have to be trained. What happens when the information going into generative AI comes from a journalist's reporting? Or what if they paste a transcript off of an off-the-record conversation to summarize it? I'm wondering where that data goes. I've certainly been a little nervous about that myself.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of dangers here, and it's very much a case of, the information that AI produces is only as good as what it takes in. And so there are, for example, a lot of questions about the biases that can come out because the information that goes in may be biased. And so, that's where I think, human beings are pretty flawed creatures, as we know. But at this point, we're probably at least able to judge that. I mean, there's also a huge issue going on in newsrooms about whether to license our information to AI companies or not. The New York Times is in a big battle over this in court. And at the same time, the Times is, using AI more and more. But, and I just read about this today, but being very clear that while it's going to be used as a tool, it's never going to be used, at least at this point, isn't going to be used as a final product. So there are a lot of sort of ethical, legal, and other questions that are really, they're just happening now. They're bubbling up right now. This is a very, it's in the moment. And I just would like to add that, there are really good uses for AI. I can't remember the specifics, but within the past 2 years, there was a Pulitzer Prize-winning piece of reporting that used AI significantly to work through data. But the news organization was very, very upfront with its readers about how it was used and so on. And I think if we do that, we're in better shape. There's an organization in California. It's a local news startup called Cal Matters, and they're doing a lot. They are doing a lot with AI, and they're very pro AI. Whether it's an election chatbot or whether it's translation or whether it's data crunching. But even they, as upfront with it as they are, have been very careful about checking it and keeping a human in the loop.
Margaret, it sounds like maybe it's time for us to revise our journalism code of ethics that so many of us have tacked up above our desks and that we refer to just in moments of despair,
right.
reminding ourselves why we do this work that we do, and it is in the service of the public. Maybe that code needs to be rewritten with AI in mind so that everyone can be following some uniform rules and procedures.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that our practices need to change and our standards need to adjust, but I don't think that our basic beliefs and principles and motives need to change. I mean, we're still there, even though not everyone believes it, but journalists who are doing the job do believe it. We are there to serve the public. We are there to uncover information, to hold the powerful, whether it's government or business or whoever it may be, to hold them accountable. Those things are still the basics of our ethics, and to not harm other people and to, basically function the way the founders saw us as an important part of democracy. Mm-hmm. I don't think that stuff has changed.
Right.
But how do we adjust when now there's this hugely powerful tool that's just kind of coming at us like a freight train, So I guess I do think that practices need to be spelled out, but I don't think that the basic ethics of journalism need to change or should change.
Sure.
And, I guess I should add, too, that I have a researcher at the Newmark Center at Columbia, and she and I have been working on a kind of a white paper about the changing rules of ethics the changing ethics and practices that newsrooms are dealing with around AI. And it's been really fascinating. It's also been really hard to do because it's changing so quickly. And where we started, a couple months ago is a far cry from where it is now. It's just, it's really a very fast moving.
We will be interested to see that sheet when it's completed and as it continues to evolve. It does make me wonder about another ethical dilemma that isn't so much about how journalists do their work as much as it is about AI's toll or its costs in other ways. And I'm thinking about on the planet, actually. Mm-hmm. AI requires massive amounts of energy to power its thinking. And so as the world starts to embrace AI, the energy demands are rapidly increasing. How much of an environmental risk does AI pose?
It does take tremendous amounts of energy to power AI. And that is a topic that, as we think about climate change, as we think about energy use, does need to be grappled with. But I don't think it has been very thoroughly grappled with yet. We know that it's true, but are there going to be a set of principles and rules around how much we'll use it to acknowledge that it's such a suck on energy and power? That's kind of a whole separate issue that does need to be dealt with, but I think it's kind of on the middle to back burner at best at this point.
Sure. And that would make sense given we know the heads of big tech companies seem to be cozying up with a lot of people in power right now, and that could potentially stay then on the back burner.
That's right, because a lot of what's happening among the tech, CEOs and powerful people is they really are pushing back. And the reason that they want to be close to power is they don't want regulation that would inhibit their growth and their profits. So, when you look at the big picture of what's happening in Washington and around the country, I think we have to know that this isn't just a money grab. It's also a power grab that has to do with regulation. And so, these issues are very intertwined with each other.
Margaret, we're going to dig into that a little bit more. We're speaking with Margaret Sullivan here on the Metro on WDET. She's the executive director for the Craig Newmark Center for Journalism, Ethics, and Security at Columbia University.
Up next, we highlight an educational streaming service for incarcerated people. Stay with us on the Metro. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Kerry Jr. II. access to news and information is the key to cultivating an informed society. As a public radio listener, you know that very well. And bridging the digital divide and funding schools and libraries come to mind as key to expanding access to communities. But one group of people are often overlooked in this conversation, and that's the people who are incarcerated. In this next conversation, Tia and Robin speak with the leader of a company that created an educational streaming platform just for them.
There's a lot to think about from the recent movie Sing Sing. It's the first time a film has simultaneously been released in theaters and in prisons. It tells the story of Divine G, a man incarcerated for a crime he didn't commit. Played by Coleman Dingo, Divine G joins a prison acting class where he finds community and purpose. Now, the film is fictional, but the acting class is based on a real arts program at Sing Sing Prison in New York. And the movie also features formerly incarcerated graduates of the program who give powerful performances alongside Domingo.
And Robin, we should note, he's nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor and the movie for Best Adapted Screenplay. When Sing Sing was released in theaters last summer, it also became available to stream on Edovo, a free online education platform serving over 900,000 incarcerated learners. Brian Hill is the CEO of Edovo Foundation. He joins the show to talk about the significance of connecting incarcerated people to information and education. Welcome to the Metro, Brian.
Good to be here. Thanks for letting me join.
Of course. So we mentioned the Sing Sing project. What makes the movie unique compared to others available on Edovo?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that are unique about Sing Sing. The way that the producers in A24 sort of put it all together, I would encourage anyone to sort of look into all of the amazing things they did to support the actors throughout. Those actors were actors in the film, but actually played a real role in Sing Sing, resided in Sing Sing for a time, and many were part of the RTA program that put on that play. So they actually agreed to go back into the prison to film the movie. But it's really the first major motion picture that we've released onto the platform as well. So it was historical on many fronts.
Yeah. And just speaking of Edovo itself, what resources do incarcerated people have access to?
Yeah, so a lot has changed inside jails and prisons in America over the past few years. Edovo came on the scene about 10 years ago about 12 years ago and started introducing wireless networks and tablets to enable education and programming on the inside. Tablets are now pretty prolific inside prisons, reaching well over half of the incarcerated population. And they do lots of things, communication, entertainment, other things that are designed to help reimburse the cost of the infrastructure. But Edovo is uniquely a nonprofit that delivers education, rehabilitation, vocational training across an array of areas to help really provide individuals the tools and resources they need to improve their life while they're incarcerated and prepare for reentry.
And Brian, your father was an educator in prisons, which is a huge task to take on. Can you talk about his experience and how technology being used in prisons has changed?
Yeah, when I was growing up, my dad taught in Folsom Prison, as you mentioned, and so at night he would bring home the essays and share the stories of those who he was teaching. But he taught in a classroom of about 14 to 20 people, and that was the reality across America. Is we had a very large incarcerated population in America compared to other countries in the world, throughout the world. And we, in truth, only about 1 out of every 5 was getting access to any type of education and programming. So even though he was doing this tremendous work, and many are doing that work across the country, correctional facilities just were not set up to structurally serve and financially able to provide the education and opportunities for people to really make changes in their life during this time. And technology has, like I said, over this last decade has really shifted that through the introduction of tablets and wireless networks to securely deliver this technology inside. We now reach, as you mentioned, about 1 million people inside jails and prisons who now have free daily access to a whole host of resources, including courses like the ones my dad taught, collegiate courses, all the way down to sort of literacy and learning how different vocations and also thinking about things like parenting while incarcerated or cognitive behavioral therapy and even meditation.
Yeah, and Robin and I actually talk about it often when we were talk about just the prison system itself. And sometimes this is the first place people have a touch base, or they touch a certain information. Maybe this is the first time they're looking at long form books or novels, or even learning a little bit more about different religions. It's so many different ways that people are connecting within prisons, and this is another way that you all are helping them out. So, can you talk a little bit about the technology they're being used to help folks seeking information in prisons? You said over 900,000 people, almost 1 million folks. So can you talk about that technology?
Yeah, so in prison, I think sometimes people have a hard time picturing what it's like to have nothing. I mean, when we're presented with a question or a challenge today, we pull out our phone, we hop on the internet, we can ask Alexa. I mean, there's thousands of ways in which we can rapidly get information to us. But now picture, you're inside a correctional facility, and all of a sudden you get a phone call from a loved one at home who says, I have pancreatic cancer. There's nowhere to go to find out what that means. And it may be the first time you've heard about this. That's just one simple example of not having the information and education at your fingertips, let alone someone who's going into prison, maybe at the age of 18, they made a mistake, and they are now trying to figure out what they should do with their life. They've been living a different life, and they want to walk out the doors living a very different life than when they came in, without the capacity and the resources to dive into like what careers are available to me or what jobs are available. Can I finish my GED while I'm here? I haven't fully learned how to read yet. How can I skill up and learn, gain literacy skills or financial literacy as well? All of those elements, again, it's hard to picture and to appreciate just what having nothing is like. But now, again, any morning someone can wake up in most jails and prisons in America now, pick up a device, and on that device they can jump into the Adobe application and start exploring across 35,000 plus hours of content and 450 plus partners who are bringing material from all different angles into the facilities directly to them.
And Brian, I just want to stick with that a little bit as well, because that access to information, it is something that we often take for granted. We can pull out our phones in our pockets. We can go to our laptops. We're Googling whatever we need to Google. And you just talked about it a little bit, but talk about this, having that access to Adovo in prisons and what it means to be able to just look it up on a tablet or on a computer when you're in a prison setting.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's fair. I think this is really you think about how much anxiety it could create without access to that information, to not know what's going on and to just be waiting for the day in which you return home, hoping that you're ready. And so, like you mentioned, that technology is now available. It's in their hands, and what we see is tremendous progress happening across the board. And we receive thousands of hundreds of letters every week, thousands and thousands of letters every year of people just saying, letters from people who've spent years and decades in prison, and they say, I've been in here 20 years, and this is the first time I've felt hope. This is the first time where I've realized that I have an ability to really make progress. And that's I think what the Adobe platform could be. They jump into the platform, they can search what they want to find, or they can just hop on a path, set a goal for themselves, and really start charting their course. And Adobe's mission is really to figure out, how do we help people find, get and stay on this path, whatever that path is. And it's a real strong cross-section of America inside jails and prisons, and everyone's at a different place. And so we really want to try to reach them where they are, no matter what they're trying to solve in their life at the time.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're speaking with Brian Hill of the Adovo Foundation. That's an online education platform that connects incarcerated people to information. So, Brian, you've talked about how Adovo is connecting people to information and to the outside world, those who are incarcerated. I'm wondering also if you're seeing ways that it is connecting people to each other. For example, are you seeing study groups forming?
Yeah, no, it's a super fascinating thing to watch. When you give, we're a strong believer, and philosophically we just believe, give people the opportunity and let them, jump at the chance. And so it's exciting when we look at the data and we see all of a sudden in a certain facility, lots of people on the platform taking the same course at the same pace at the same time. So I think there are these pockets are happening throughout, because the tools are now available in the common areas, in the day rooms, in this very secure way. And so they're able to, someone who has expertise in an area can now pick up the tablet and have everyone turn, and whether they're doing a Bible study or whether they're doing sort of a GED preparation class, that's now possible to happen in the unit and empowering individuals to become both the teachers and the learners. So it's all there. The tools are there where they just weren't before.
Longtime critics of the prison system in the U.S. will say that it is not focused on rehabilitation. And I wonder how you see Adovo playing a role here when it comes to providing people who are incarcerated with educational opportunities.
Yeah, no, I think this is a game changer, as people tell us that. That's the word they use probably most often in the letters. It's truly a game changer for what's happening inside corrections. And I think, it's easy to be critical of jails and prisons without recognizing the complexity of what's happening here and also the challenges. There are so many people we incarcerate at a rate we have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated population. So we have a unique problem in America. And you have some very dedicated staff who want it to be about rehabilitation, but the lack of funding, the lack of just capacity and space for classrooms, it just wasn't a reality, which is why this technology has become such a breakthrough, why Adovo is so critical to changing the scene and making this a place where rehabilitation can happen. I think another thing that's super intriguing about the platform is it is very much up to the individual. We're really giving everybody a choice. It's a free application. It's available to them on a daily basis, but it's up to them to make that choice. We see it upon us to really make it accessible and available to everyone at every learning level, and create a real broad brush of what's there on the platform. But we do leave it up. We do still say, this is your chance to take a shot. Now take that shot.
Okay, so Adovo's helping people to shoot their shot who are incarcerated. What happens after someone leaves prison? Can they take Adovo with them?
Yeah, things get incredibly more complex as people walk out of the prison, as you can imagine, and there's a lot to figure out. So we have made Adovo Go available to all those who walk out of the prison facility. So anyone, when they step out, can step onto their Adovo Go facility through any connected device. Sort of turns off their inside account, opens up their outside account. But most importantly, as you step to the outside, a lot of limitations come off, and there's a lot of opportunity that's now available in many areas. Our hope in many ways is to really focus and help people set up a plan and a structure pre-release, so that way they're able to then just go home, execute on that. And most importantly, we've created this positive record, a transcript for them that they can use with their parole officers, with employers, even with their family. It's sort of a record of achievement of what they've been able to do during their time. Up to this point, it was always just a rap sheet or a record as a negative. And for the first time ever, they can walk out with a real positive message and a story of what they've done and accomplished during their time. And that's been transformative in interviews, getting custody of children back, all of the things that need to happen right as soon as you get home.
Brian, in the last 30 seconds that we have, how else can we improve access to education and information for more incarcerated people?
Yeah, right now we're reaching about half of the United States. So there are many states that can still, we encourage to pick up the baton and make it available inside. And then I think something that America generally can do is to think about ways in which you can connect with and support, because while we can provide all the digital skills and tools that we want, nothing is more helpful than being able to come home to a community and to individuals who are ready to help, mentor, and support. And so thinking and finding organizations and ways to get tied in that way, I think, is critical.
Brian Hill is the CEO of the Adovo Foundation. That's a free online learning platform for incarcerated people. Brian, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks for letting me be on the show. Appreciate it.
Coming up, we'll learn what it takes to envision a future for Black people in Detroit. This is the Metro. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II. And in this final conversation, Tia and Robin talk to a professor whose work envisions a future for Black people in which they not only survive, but they thrive.
Lauren Hood is a professor of practice in urban planning at the University of Michigan. She's also the founder of the Institute of Afro-Urbanism and Action Lab, working at the intersection of Black aspiration and community transformation. Lauren, welcome back to the Metro, or Professor Hood, I should say.
You can say Lauren. My students don't even use Professor Hood. Thank you for having me again.
So we've been discussing the history of Black people in Detroit. We know things like redlining neighborhoods perpetuated the wealth gap, the inequities that Tia mentioned. But what other ways has our built environment affected the Black community?
That's a good question. I think where my practice is now wants to be focused on aspiration, so it's hard for me to stay rooted in talking about gaps and adversity, because I feel like even as you were recounting those things, like I had a visceral, physical reaction to hearing Black folks described in that way, because those things are true and accurate, but they're more related to our position in a system versus being part of our identity. But I feel like the more that we use that kind of language to talk about ourselves, we kind of adopt it as an identity and then behave in a certain way. So I had to intentionally orient my practice towards aspiration and focusing on our particular set of strengths and how we amplify what we're already good at and what's already working, instead of focusing on fighting against what isn't working and staying rooted in like adversity and struggle.
Let's go there then. What is working and what do you want to see more of? And I want to ask you that from a planning perspective.
Well, it's interesting. So I'm trained as an urban planner. I teach urban planning. My degree is in community development. So I feel like I was oriented and educated toward the built environment. So when I would talk about a city like a Detroit, I'm thinking more like spatially. But now when I think about my work and what's happening in that space, when I think about my work now, I'm thinking more what's happening to people. So when you talk about a Detroit from a thriving perspective, you can say, is Detroit thriving? What that really means is like, are Detroiters thriving? So thinking about not like how an environment or a set of institutions or an ecosystem does well, but how do people live better lives? And it forces you to, interrogate a different set of conditions than thinking in terms of like conventional business models or salaries or the value of a home, because those things are improving here. But if you talk to a lot of people, they're not necessarily experiencing a higher quality of life.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're talking about the metrics, the traditional metrics of capitalism, really, and you're saying that there's a lot more than that 100%. In order to...
I mean, I would argue that there are Black folks who are senior executives at corporations and by, conventional metrics make a lot of money, live in a nice house or in a nice neighborhood, their kids are in a good school. But if you ask them on a daily basis, like, do you have a good day today? Like thinking about the contortions they have to do on a regular basis in order to maintain that kind of conventional success doesn't look like thriving by the lens through which I'm trying to do my work now.
When we talk about thriving, though, especially for Black folks, for people of color, we do have to acknowledge the legacy of racism that still affects people today, right? I know you're more rooted in the present and the future, but how do you hold them both?
Here's the thing. I feel like there are enough organizations and institutions oriented in that direction. Like, we're covered on adversity. Like, we know what we went through. I feel like every time someone recounts that history, I have to relive it again. All the cells in my body are like, weighted down. And in thinking about how Black people thrive, I'm like, enough. Like, that just doesn't have to be all that we are. I get that we need to acknowledge it, and it's important to hold people, institutions, governments accountable. But I feel like a lot of times we just get stuck there and don't talk about, okay, that's there, but what else? And I also want to lean into us activating our agency. Like, in spite of all those things, we are still really capable of doing a lot of things. But I feel like we get stuck and be like, oh, well, that's just how it is. But is it? Does it have to be? It doesn't.
I was going to say, just listening to you talk a little bit now and thinking about the conversations that are had within community and the rhetoric just about, once again, leaning into this trauma bonding thing that happens oftentimes when we talk about the being downtrodden or beaten down or whatever it may be. And, you know, for me, in listening to you and just being inspired by some of the work that you do, thinking in a solution-based way versus thinking in another way. So can we talk just a little bit about that, just that rhetoric and that trauma bonding and how we can get past that conversation?
It's hard for me to even use that language. I've been saying a lot lately, this organization in my practice isn't around no more trials and tribulations. That's covered. I want to be rooted in transcendence. I think a lot about our ancestors who were enslaved. Can you imagine what it took for them to even vision freedom? How do you even, if everybody you know, everybody you're related to, every generation of your family was enslaved, how do you even envision transcending that for yourself or for future generations? If they could do that,
I know.
Think about what we can do based on where we are.
I don't even the follow-up on that is just so huge because I think about them and they were the first Afrofuturists. They were some of the first folks who sat down and thought to themselves, there is something better out here other than what we are going through right now. So when we talk just about the idea of being an Afrofuturist, the idea of looking forward and the themes of it all, can you talk just a little bit about how that laid down that foundation to get us to where we are to get today so that we can stop looking at the negative of what's happening and look forward?
Well, for me, I wanted to be intentional about enjoying my work, and being rooted in all those gaps and adversity was not fun. Like I said, I had a visceral reaction to hearing certain things. I'm like, how can I be my ancestors' wildest dream? Did they want me to be stewed in adversity and struggle narratives? When I have a choice? And I know that is hard for some people to hear. Some people will be like, no, it's not a choice to deal with struggle and adversity. But to the extent that you can, from wherever you are at, can you start to orient yourself to where you want to be versus where you don't want to be? I feel like I got really indoctrinated to the law of attraction and The Secret. And it talks about, well, how are you going to get where you want to go if you don't know where you want to go? We're all really good at knowing what we don't want in our lives, but how often do we think about, dream about, envision about what we actually do want?
Robin and I manifest often. She's been teaching me how. She's been telling me, make sure you're writing this stuff down in the book. So I'm like, thank you, Robin. So yes, we've been working on manifesting, working on writing stuff down. We are speaking with Lauren Hood about the future of Black Detroit. She's a professor of practice and urban planning at the University of Michigan and the founder of the Institute of Afro-Urbanism. So let's talk just a little bit about Black people in the city of Detroit and your work in making sure that the future is bright.
Yeah. I think that I'm trying to lead by example with how we can do this work. I have fun doing my work at the Institute. It doesn't hurt. It's not painful. It's not stressful. If it becomes stressful, I'm like, this is not the right path. There must be another way that is more in flow to get where I'm trying to go. Or perhaps where I think I'm trying to go is not the highest and best destination. So I think to the extent that I can model that us Black folks, trying to improve our lived experience can be a path of joy, collective visioning, excitement, imagination, but it's tricky. I've been intentionally staying under the radar with that because I know there are people that don't want us to live that way. So this is why you can't find a lot about what we're doing specifically for that reason. But I also am intentional about other builders, dreamers, visionaries knowing about what we're doing than trying to tell the whole world what we're doing. It's like, psst, you looking for a different way to do this? Versus hey, everybody.
And I think there's something important in that because there's this shield, I guess you can say, you put up around yourself, especially within the Black community, when we do understand that having the audacity to be Black does ruffle feathers.
Well, that also, not just the being Black, but the being Black and living well.
Yeah.
Even for Black people, seeing other Black people living well is a problem at times. Or you want to get said that you're not authentic anymore, or you don't understand what's really going on with your people.
Yeah.
You've isolated yourself, you've turned your back. Like, this was a conversation we had internally with the Institute has a fellowship program right now with 8 legacy Black Detroiters, and we talk about these very things. And a couple of us were talking about, I'm trying to model like holistic abundance. And then the conversation became, well, how can some of us be abundant when so many of us are in struggle? And we're like, well, you can't be what you can't see. If those of us who have access aren't modeling a certain way of being, how is anybody going to transcend? But there was an overwhelming feeling of needing to downplay our well-being so that this anonymous peanut gallery couldn't talk smack. And then it becomes like we're blocking our own abundance if we are worried about being talked about. So these are the very conversations that we're having, like, on a regular basis, and trying to navigate and overcome.
You just speaking about it just brings up things for me too. I'm thinking to myself, same shared live experience, 100%. I understand that 100%. So just getting to the fellowship is, of course, Bryce Detroit's one of those fellows there. Let's talk a little bit about the fellowship, and you talked about your cohort is going to Atlanta. And going to talk to the Black people of Atlanta and talk about their success that they're having right now. So can you talk a little bit about going to Atlanta, the fellowship, and what you hope to learn?
Yeah, so since 2021, I have been interviewing Black people who are thriving in different cities, mostly in the U.S., but I did interview people in Berlin. But the metric for thriving that the Institute is using is, I think I said this last time, it's having some degree of demonstrated agency, abundance, and audacity. So it's not conventional success metrics. It's more about freedom and liberation. Like, are you living a life where you are as free as you can be? Are you the most you can be on a regular basis and still managing to, in this system of capitalism, like, do well? So that is the metric we're using. And I've interviewed people in all these different cities, New York, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, and Berlin. And the fellowship over the course of this year is going to go engage with those people that I've interviewed. So it's not necessarily like we're going to engage in a public dialogue, but I already have people who I feel like I call them our constellation versus a network. But in the Institute for Afro-Urbanism's constellation of people, I've already engaged the thrivers. There's already an existing relationship. So instead of trying to be like, hey, person at X organization, my group is coming to Atlanta, it's like, hey, I interviewed you about Black thriving. I have got this amazing cast of superhero characters coming to your town from Detroit. We want to talk to you more about what you said in your interview. Like, I'm sharing the audio of the interviews with the fellows so they can deeply understand the people that we're about to meet. So it's kind of like this world tour of Black thriving. And just keeping the conversations very rooted in, again, like aspirations, future states, wildest dreams. I use that language a lot. Like, what are our wildest dreams for the future? I think, like, having been someone who worked a lot in community engagement, I would ask people what they want, and they would give very basic responses, like, oh, it's a little dirty over here. Can you get the lights turned on? Like the crime, like very basic things. I'm like, that's your wildest dream? Your wildest dream is just to have the trash picked up. Like, that's nobody's wildest dream. That is a basic necessity. Like, how do we elevate, exponentially expand people's ideas around what is possible? That's why I think Afrofuture is like a great tool. It's just like a way to imaginate beyond convention.
Yes. I love the use of constellation as well. But speaking of Black thriving, you are developing the Black Thriving Index. How is that research project going, and what will we learn from it?
Well, this is super fun to talk about. So, I have a master's degree from a conventional academic institution. Shout out University of Detroit Mercy. And I think I was trained to think of research and data collection in a certain way. So I've done these qualitative interviews. I've done 65. They're 90 minutes on average, and we have the audio of that. So last summer, I sent myself away on a writing sabbatical. I'm like, I'm going to lock myself away in a room. I'm going to re-listen to the audio. And I'm working with this consultant who is a white guy. Culture is important. He's like, yeah, you determine what the key findings are, and then you write this white paper and tell the world about it. And that's what I told philanthropy I was going to do. But I sent myself away, and it wasn't clicking. And I was like, I talked to a friend of mine, Chanel Beebe, shout out Dr. Beebe, who is a researcher. And she was like, no, you do your work in community. Why would you think isolating yourself yourself alone was like the way to go. And I started rethinking like how I could analyze this data in a more communal way. So part of what the fellows and I will do when we're on tour is listen to the audio of the interview with the person in the room. So we piloted that last month in Detroit. I had one of my Detroit interviewees, Valencia Vanner, a.k.a. Faya, a poet. So we played her audio with all the fellows in the room and her, and just listened to her like respond to the interview questions, and then we would pause at certain moments and like have a discussion around it. And like creating this new way of analyzing data was so much more life-giving for me. You know, and I even Googled last summer, I was like, how do Afro-descendant people convey knowledge? It did not say white paper. It said oral histories, dance, poetry, music. And I was like, okay, everything in there like resonated deeply with my spirit. Like thinking about this white paper just wasn't hitting.
No, but an oral history or conversation about
it.
So
yeah, we're having this dialogue collectively as a group, and the analytics look a lot different than me being like, these are the key findings. Like everybody who listens to it has a different key finding.
Yes. Lauren Hood is a professor of practice in urban planning at the University of Michigan and the founder of the Institute of Afro-Urbanism. And as always, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
That's going to do it for the Metro. This show is hosted by Robin Vincent and Tia Graham. It's produced by Sam Corey, myself, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender. Our senior producer is David Lyons. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.